garden offices or garden rooms are big business at the moment. You can have them built, or you can buy them flat packed and build them yourself. You can even rent one in your own garden. Many people have some sort of garden room now. Why are they called garden rooms and not sheds? And why do they appear so expensive? It's true, I know of some garden rooms costing over £50,000, but I also know many come in under £5,000. What? You still think that sounds expensive? Well, if you think of a reasonable size garden shed, that will cost around £3,000, and it's just a wooden skin frame. A shed is designed to keep the rain off whatever you want to store in it, and it does that very well. However, if you have ever tried to store paper or fabrics or something like this in a shed, you will know that it gets quite damp and mouldy if it's left in there for any length of time. A garden room is designed to act more like a room in your house. It is insulated and damp proofed, and it usually has electricity and nice double glazed windows. The inside will look the same as any room in your house if that's what you wish, and you will be able to store anything you like in it, knowing it will be safe from the elements. Also, the garden room is a nicer place to spend time in than a drafty, spider-ridden shed. So, can a DIYer build a £21,000 to £25,000 garden room office? And if they can, should they? This film is going to examine this idea and see what the answer is. We want a building with minimal maintenance, as we want to work in it, not on it. Now let's see how we get on. We recently built an office for ASD in a garden, and this film is designed to give you an idea of what is involved if you're going to buy one or build one or rent one. And we have cost out at each stage of our build to give you an idea of how much one would cost you if you decided to do it and what it is you're actually paying for. Okay, let's see what it takes to go from this to that. So can a DIYer save £12,000? Let's see. The footings. All good buildings need good footings, and this is where some of the major costs can come from. Here you can see we've marked out our footings, and this should only take half a day to dig out by hand. It is in the top corner of a Victorian house garden, the furthest away from the house, and under a neighbour's tree. When paying contractors, they will cost the job on their experience, and if they have any sense, they will add extra money for the unexpected. In our case, this would have been wise. What should have taken no more than a day took one person a whole week. There were two reasons for this. One, the tree and its roots, and the fact that in the olden days, people used to dig holes in their gardens and bury their rubbish, because there was nowhere else to get rid of it. We had roots the size of human legs and so much rubbish. Getting rid of the spoil and unused stuff is where a lot of the cost comes from a build. In our case, our rubbish was a lot of hardcore and stone, metal things, all sorts of mad stuff. So we decided to sieve it and reuse the material where we could. This saved money on waste removal and buying in extra concrete, but cost us in time. However, as it was our time, it only cost blood, sweat and a lot of tears. What makes a garden room different to a shed is the insulation, and that starts in the footing. Here we dug out two rectangles and filled it with our reclaimed hardcore and a couple of inches of concrete on top. Then, to add to the footing's depth, we ran a course of 4-inch blockwork around the perimeter of our floor pan. This depth will allow 4 inches insulation to go under the floor, not forgetting a waterproof membrane. To dress the front of the footings, we ran a course in red engineering brick, just in case it would show, as it looks better than blockwork. At this point, we weren't sure about the landscaping after the build. You can see here that once the blockwork had gone down, we added a further 2 to 4 inches of concrete all the way around the outside of the footings. You'll see why later. The cost so far. For materials, we're looking at £392.35. The oversight. To the oversight or base, we added the insulation. This was put in very tight to ensure that no cold can leak up from the ground, and it sits on top of the waterproof membrane. The size of the office room is going to be 12 foot by 11 foot. And we have a course of blocks running through the middle. This course is to take the weight of the floor joists. By doing this, we can save money on timber, and save on the height of the building, so we don't have to dig down further and dig out more ground, which would be more costly. And we are only going to use 3x2s here to keep the overall height of the building down, due to building regs and to keep the neighbours happy. Because the membrane has gone over the blockwork, we have added a DPC, a stronger damp proofing strip, like the kind you would find in brickwork, and in your own house probably. This is so the weight of the joist don't cut through the plastic membrane and then let damp up through. That's the theory anyway. Once this has been completed and we've put the DPC on top of all the areas that the joist will sit, we can now move on to framing out the floor. Building the frame. To start the framing, now listen carefully, this bit is important. We start with the floor, leaving the roof for last. We are DIYers, you know. I think it's important to point this out. Like I said, we are using 3x2s for the floor, but we are using 5x2s for everywhere else. This is because we want to use 4-inch insulation and have an inch air gap for an overall 5-inch insulation surround. The insulation we are using comes in 8-foot by 4-foot boards. So we set out the frame with 16-inch centres, I think. If I remember, it was so we could get 4 strips of insulation in between from each board. The insulation is one of the most expensive bits to the build. I think at the time they were £35 each. Those small bits of timber you can see going between the long bits are very important and are called noggins. They really are important. They make the frame much stronger and more rigid. If you notice in the corners of each frame there are extra uprights. This is to add strength and to ensure that there's somewhere for the boards later on to be fixed. Make each wall frame on the ground and lift it into place when you are done. We can't show you this being done because the build was really done by one person and he didn't really care much about getting the best shots. Plus it was a heat wave and he uses that as an excuse a lot. Wuss. The cost at this stage. The fittings was £392.35 plus the framing cost so far with the insulation, that's £749.88, bringing a total of £1,139.23. The roof joists. We are using 5x2s on the roof, and of course they are stood on the 2-inch side for added strength. Also notice that we have added to the wall frame on the front 2 2x5s standing on the short side to add strength where the double door is going to be. We are not having windows in this office as we want more room inside, and the double doors will be all the light we need. We are adding a large overhang of the roof all the way around, and I will explain why later. Once the joists have gone in, lengths of 5x2s will be ripped down to create furring strips so that when the boards are added to the roof they will slope back for water rain runoff. Once this is done and before the OSB boards go on, the insulation was added. This is because it's a horrible job when cutting the insulation. It creates a lot of dust, so with no boards this means there's more ventilation. Now the OSB boards are added to the outside. Then it's wrapped in a breathable membrane that will keep the moisture out. The cost at this stage, adding together roughly all the things we've used so far, comes to £2,848.64. Fitting out the inside. So, we finish insulating the floor. It is important to go around the building looking for places where due to the building technique the main insulation couldn't reach, and then you fill those holes or gaps in so as not to cause a cold spot later, like these areas here. We were waiting for some fancy cladding that looked like wood and was in vertical strips and looked cool, but was quite expensive and was taking a long time to get hold of. So we continued with the inside. The room was wrapped, so we weren't really worried about water getting in, and plus it was a heat wave. Once the insulation gap filling was done, we put in the subfloor and we started to clad the walls with plywood. Remember, we don't want maintenance, so using the plywood means we can stain it and we never have to worry about painting it again. Plus we don't need to plaster, saving more time and money. Then we added the electric. We ran a 10mm armoured cable from the house to a consumer board that we fitted inside the garden room to add a little bit of safety. And then we ran cables under the floor to wall lights and sockets. Now remember, we're planning to use this as an office only, so we really wanted something low maintenance and quite robust. So we decided to build our own storage, and as you can see, we used plywood again and got a bit creative with our stains. So we used an oak stain and a dark green stain. And we did use some nice furniture on the cupboards for handles and soft closing door hinges. We finished off the panels with little strips of wood to hide the gaps and put a kind of skirting board around the bottom. We found a laminate floor that was on special offer at some DIY store and just clipped that in place, and that was the interior finished. The cost at this stage, well, it's looking good. At the moment, this milestone is £3,990.64. However, there are quite a few things that we haven't added up at this point that you occur as you go along. We'll see at the end how much we've actually spent. Later is here. Remember the extra bit of concrete around the outside of the footings and the large overhang all the way around the room I talked about? Well, this is what it was for. So we've built a shed for the garden equipment on the outside of it, and this is the door, and we use cheaper cladding on the inside, and we'll fit that out for all the gardening equipment. The outside. So we did the roof in just simple cheap felt. We're probably going to come back and do that with steel classic rib in the future. We managed to save quite a bit of money on the door. I happen to know someone who makes garden rooms and does double glazing and doors, and bumped into him and just mentioned I was looking for a charcoal grey door, and he happened to have one that was an over order and sold it to me cheap. Okay, granted it doesn't open on the side that we were hoping it to, but that's kind of worked out better because we've got a desk on that side, so the door doesn't bother it. So we saved quite a bit of money there. We're waiting so long for this fancy cladding that we were going to put on the front, and we'd used this hollow sort of PVC cladding that's usually for soffits, I think, and on the back because we didn't want it to stick out for the neighbours, and it was black. In the shed bit we used the white version so it would reflect light a bit more, but when we fitted the black PVC stuff to the back and the sides where you weren't really going to see it because it's against the fence, we quite liked it. It looked nice. So having to wait months for this other fancy stuff, we decided to put it on the front, and quite frankly I'm glad we did, because weirdly the black blends in really nicely with the garden. Now the garden's had a chance to sort of grow back and we've done the landscaping, it really sort of sets off the plants greens and other colours, so it was a good choice. Plus it was much cheaper. It was probably £1,800 cheaper than having some fancy faux wood effect. I have seen it on other rooms, and I'm quite glad that we went with what we went. At the end of the day, this is an office space and it sits nicely in the garden. At night you can't even see it. The cost at this stage. The roof cost £388.80 and the door was mate rates at £900. All the cladding and the plastic used on the outside the soffits and everything, the guttering, the downpipes, all came to £1,992.18. The landscaping to get into the office, including replacing old fence panels and gravel boards, came to £464.17. The cost of the whole build, when all the invoices were added up, including all the little things not mentioned in this film, all the extra screws and bits and pieces. So the total cost of this build of a garden room of 12 foot by 11 foot with a outside shed came to £8,644.81. Not bad. I was told that a garden room this size and spec would come to around £21,000 if you'd paid a contractor. My friend who does this on a daily basis said there's no way he could have brought the same size room in for the price that we did it. So, can a DIYer do it? Yes. Should a DIYer do it? Yes, probably. Can you save £12,000 on labour? Yes. Is it easy to save money on materials as well? Well, you have to shop around and know a few good places to go. Should you have a go? Well, I think you can. With YouTube now, there's plenty of people that show you how to do some of the more complicated things. So good luck if you're going to have a go.